Tyler, what is SOC 2 compliance?
SOC 2 stands for the Service Organization Controls Type 2, which is a cybersecurity compliance framework. It's actually developed and managed by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, CPAs. So they're the ones who will audit your compliance with that framework.
So how does it work?
The framework provides a set of what's called common criteria or common controls that organizations will self-determine how they are going to meet. So that'll be controls such as protecting your devices or policies to prevent insider threat. Organizations then make determinations themselves about how they're going to meet each of those criteria, and then they write those out, and then they have an auditor verify that they are doing what they are attesting that they are doing. So your SOC 2 report is going to contain first a set of statements you make about what your intentions are for meeting those controls, those criteria, and then the auditor's findings on how well you are meeting the obligations you're setting for yourself.
In that regard, there's no actual kind of like specifications. There's no requirements per se. It's not like a traditional framework that tells you you have to do this or you have to do that or you can't do another thing.
Yeah, that's right. The way I describe it to our clients is there are criteria you need to address. So there's no requirement to have antivirus. There's no requirement to have intrusion detection. There's no requirement to have an information security policy. There are, however, categories where you need to have some decision made. You can decide not to have antivirus on your computers. That's acceptable, and your report will note that. But you are going to be asked what your decision is about that, for example. There's no specific requirement. You could, to your point, you could on the list, and for every common criteria, you could simply decide we're going to do nothing. The auditor would then audit that. You'd then get a report that says, this company is doing nothing. We audited them. We confirmed they're doing nothing just like they say. And you'd have a kind of faultless report, which would note that you're doing nothing. But the auditor is going to know what you've decided to do for each of those criteria.
One of the most common questions I get is blank required for SOC 2? Mm-hmm. And blank can be anything. Are pen tests required for SOC 2? Is IDS required for SOC 2? Do I have to have EDR or MDM? Based on what you're saying, there is no actual requirement for anything. You don't have to have those things. So why should a company do it?
There is no actual requirement, but here's what's going to happen. There's a criteria for, let's take a pen test, for example. The auditor is going to ask me, hey, Tyler, what is agency's policy on pen testing? And I could say our policy is not to get a pen test. I could say our policy is to get one pen test a quarter. I could say whatever I want. Whatever I say, they're going to confirm we're doing what we say. Now, there is no requirement, to your point. So I could say our policy is to never pen test, and they'd write that and they'd confirm it. The problem is that whatever my answer to that question is going to go in my report. So when we send our SOC 2 report to a client, the client is going to read the report because they care about security. They're going to get down to the part on pen testing, and they're going to say, oh, agency never runs a pen test, and the auditor confirmed they never run a pen test. And then they're going to go back to me or you, and they're going to say, well, this SOC 2 is meaningless. You're not doing any security, so we're not going to accept it. Here's a security questionnaire. By the way, you still have to go get a pen test. And that's true for every other requirement. So the things that you could think of as requirements in SOC 2 are really just categories that you need to make a decision on what you're going to do. If you choose to do nothing, you could still get your SOC 2. But when a company receives it and reads it, they're the one, your client, your partner, the exact companies you're trying to work with, or the reason you did the SOC 2 in the first place, they're going to see you're not doing anything, and they're going to come back and just not accept the result. They're going to make you do more.
In that regard, two SOC 2 reports are completely different. Like, they're not necessarily the same in any way, and you could have a pretty worthless SOC 2 report, it sounds like, if you don't actually do these best practices. To confirm, what do you actually get at the end of this? Is it a certification? It sounds like you just get a report that shows findings. So what do you actually get at the end of this?
Yeah, exactly. You're going to get after your audit, you're going to get a report from your auditor that confirms that the auditor reviewed exactly what your compliance plan is, what you're attesting. They're going to audit all of that. So they're going to say, here's what the company promised it was doing. We checked it. Here's what they're actually doing. And they're going to note any discrepancies. To your point, the report that I get, we complete our SOC 2, we get a report from the auditor. That report is going to both summarize the controls we chose to have in place, which a client is going to want to see, and then it's going to audit how well we are adhering to those controls we have in place. And so to your point, All SOC 2 reports are different because the part that summarizes the controls that the company chose to have in place, that's up to each company what controls they want to have. Some companies are going to do a very easy SOC 2 where the controls they choose are very minimal, and others are going to do a really in-depth SOC 2 where the controls they choose to have are extremely strict. All the auditor is going to check is how you're adhering to the controls you set yourself. The auditor doesn't have an opinion on what the controls need to be.